Anne Graham was in the midst of having a very successful business career when, at the age of 43, while training for a marathon, her persistent leg pain was eventually diagnosed as osteosarcoma, which is a rare bone cancer that normally strikes adolescents and young adults. Anne was treated at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City, and on today's podcast, we'll discuss a terminal young osteosarcoma patient named Alyssa, whose mother she befriended, and Anne arranged for Alyssa to spend a 3-day weekend in the city to see performances from the Rockettes and a performance of the Nutcracker, as dancing was a big part of Alyssa's life. After the show had ended, Alyssa was allowed to dance across the stage, and as an added bonus, she spent time at the American Girl store. 2 weeks later, Alyssa passed away, but Anne never forgot watching her and so many other children suffer from this dreaded form of pediatric cancer. In 2016, Anne officially started MIB Agents, which is a nonprofit concentrating solely on how to improve the lives of osteosarcoma patients. Anne will talk about this nonprofit and her hopes to continue to fund research that will ultimately not only improve the lives of these osteosarcoma patients, but move towards a cure for this cancer that no one deserves. It is now my pleasure to welcome Anne Graham to my podcast. It's an honor and pleasure to have you here, and thank you very much for coming on to my show.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat with you.
Well, I am very equally as excited to chat with you. You've got quite a story to tell. Now, in the latter part of the first decade of the 2000s, things were going great for you. You're married with 3 children. You had a great job. You were the director of sales and marketing at Relais and Chateau, which is a luxury hotel and restaurant group. You had also had owned a floral and event design company, which you had publication credits from Martha Stewart Weddings, Vogue magazines. You would run events for Lexus and Associated Press. So is it fair to say that at that time, your life was going as planned?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I loved my life. I loved my life. And I remember when I was diagnosed, it was very upsetting. And so I had seen our family priest after church one day. And when I told him, I started, just welling up. And he goes, there's a chance that you could come out of this a better person. And I was like, I'm really happy with where I'm at right now. I don't think I want to be a better person. I just want to be me, like right now. And I think you can't fight a battle on this level, and you can't fight a disease alongside children who have the same disease as you and not come out transformed. You can't come out a better person. I mean, you can't not come out a better person. It changes your life. It absolutely changes your life. And it makes, in my case, it made the work that I was doing that I loved and found very fulfilling, not fulfilling anymore. It wasn't enough. I had to do something to make it better for kids who were in treatment.
Well, of course, when you were told that you may come out a better person, that's the last thing, as you basically said, was on your mind. There's no way that was going to happen, I'm sure. And just to go over how this happened, you were training for a marathon in 2010. You had some leg pain, which certainly when you train for that kind of a race can happen. I don't know if you thought it was anything serious right away, but it was there. You decided to get it looked at. And what happened when you got the pain checked out?
Well, the first reaction from my sports medicine doctor was, well, listen, you're 43. You're not, you're going to have some pain when you're running now. And my doctor really didn't lay a hand on me, didn't really look at where the pain was, even though the pain was in a very specific space. So it wasn't until 9 months later, and probably as many misdiagnoses later, that I had a really large event. It was a celebrity wedding. And the Monday after that wedding, I couldn't get out of I couldn't put weight on my feet, couldn't put weight on my leg. It hurt too badly. And it was, had started to break, as it turns out, right where the tumor was on the top of my tibia. And I crutched back into my doctor's office and I said, I need an MRI. I had been asking for one and I kept not getting one. And finally I said, I need one. And she said, well, insurance. And I said, no, don't care. I will pay you right now to get me in to an MRI machine. We have to find out what's going on in here. Like I think there are these times in your life when your soul gets a voice of its own, and when your mouth opens, the voice of your soul speaks more strongly, with more force than you intended. And that was one of those moments I said, no, and this was so outside of character for me to go in and demand an MRI, but I knew I needed it.
9 months after the first time you went to see your sports doctor, were you in pain from then on? And did you continue running during that period? And what were they telling you during this period that you had? Before they actually looked and found out what you had.
Right. So you name it, if it could happen to your leg, that was my diagnosis of the month. So my first diagnosis was, well, you're training too hard. You're 43. You're an older runner now. Maybe you should think about running on the opposite side of the road. Really kind of crazy things, especially given my past medical history, where I'm not somebody who shows up at the doctor's office, once a month because I don't have anything better to do, or I think this might be something. Like, I was really in pain, and unbeknownst to me, I was having the typical symptoms of somebody with osteosarcoma, though I was well outside of the age range of somebody with osteosarcoma. So the hallmark of osteosarcoma is it hurts at night. So it will wake you up at night. And for me, I would wake up and it would take my breath away. So I'd sit up in bed and go, deep breath in, and just, what do I, try to find something to take or put on it, or just to settle down the pain. And then by the time I'd wake up and walk around and go show up at my job and do the things I had to do for that day. And then I would talk myself out of, well, it's not that bad. Okay, I guess, until that night again. So the next month, it was, your IT band is tight. You've got to start rolling, use a foam roller. You may have compartment syndrome. I think we have to look into your possible compartment syndrome, stress fracture. It was just a myriad of possibilities, none of which were osteosarcoma. But to be fair, one of the first things I understand you learn in medical school is, if you hear galloping coming down the hall, first assume horses, not zebras. And it just so happened I was a zebra.
Well, I'm wondering if it's theoretically possible anyway, that the doctors, before you were diagnosed, any type of sarcoma, normally, at least, and I know of osteosarcoma, is diagnosed in adolescents, teenagers, perhaps young adults, but generally from the ages of, say, 10 to 18, you're 43 years old. So are they saying to you, well, it's not one of that type of disease because you're too old for it? Because, how rare is it for someone at 43 years old to get diagnosed with osteosarcoma?
It's pretty rare. So osteosarcoma, like all childhood cancers, are considered rare because there are less than 200,000 cases per year. the majority of those, as you correctly said, are for adolescents and young adults. So it can be anywhere from 5 years old, which would be on the more rare side, to 25 years old. If you're getting osteosarcoma beyond that point, it's likely you're a geriatric patient, and it's likely at that point that it's a disease that's spread from another primary site, not a bone site. So to be 43 and really outside of that geriatric range and the pediatric range is extraordinarily rare.
When you got your diagnosis, I know that you went to Sloan Kettering in New York. Was that something you did immediately, or were you perhaps thinking about coming to Dana-Farber or some other place a little bit closer to where you than New York City?
Yeah. So at the time we lived in upstate New York. So my first referral was to Syracuse, and we did not find an orthopedic surgeon, which is the first person you see because it's in your bone. So we didn't find the right fit for me in Syracuse. And it just so happened I have a very good friend who is pretty well connected at Sloan Kettering, who happened to call me. And when we were driving away from Syracuse, and she said, "Hey, what's going on?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, let me tell you, like, I don't know. I'm really scared. I don't know what's happening, but it doesn't sound good." And she said, "Okay, what are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, "Looking for another place to go." And she said, "Can you be at Sloan Kettering tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.?" And I said, "Yes." Like, this is, when you're in that state and you believe that it's cancer, you can't think about anything else. That's all that's important is you're in a battle for your life, and that's all you can think about. So I'm like, "Yes, yes, I'll be there tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock." And she said, "Okay, just, they'll be expecting you, and they'll take care of you." And I knew this was the case with regard to Sloan Kettering, because my husband, ironically, also a runner, and very healthy, very fit, had a rare head and neck cancer a couple of years prior, and on the advice of his specialist in upstate New York, said, "I think if you wanted to get a second opinion, please do. Here's the name of a great head and neck oncologist at Sloan Kettering. If you'd like, I'll make the appointment for you," which to us was the hallmark of an excellent physician. When you're dealing with a rare cancer, to have somebody tell you it's a good idea to have somebody ride shotgun on this with me, and let's get a team approach for you. So we knew Sloan Kettering did a great job with collaborating with home physicians, and so it was a no-brainer. Our friend recommended it. We knew that hospital, and we knew they did great work. Most importantly, and I think for anybody who's dealing with a sarcoma, you have to get to a sarcoma center. You have to get to a sarcoma center. It's the number one thing when somebody contacts our organization, MIB Agents, and says, "What do I do? I've been diagnosed with this disease." We do not give out medical advice or information, or this is not our role at all, but we will say to them, "Please go to our website. There's a resource there through SARC, which is a great sarcoma organization. You can find a sarcoma center there. Please get to a sarcoma center. You don't have to be treated at the sarcoma center, but you at least need another set of eyes on a problem of this magnitude with this kind of diagnosis." So Sloan Kettering was such a place, and I knew I was in the right place when I got there.
Now, the treatment for osteosarcoma, I'm sure there are a number of different ways to approach this. Was your treatment similar to if someone had the same illness but was, say, 15 years old, or were you treated differently because of your age and the fact that, you know, your body's more developed, say, than a 15-year-old or a young teenager?
So yes, the same, and no, not the same. So once I had a biopsy, which was an open biopsy where they take out a bit of the bone that's affected and look at it under a microscope with a pathologist, and they come back with the diagnosis of osteosarcoma. They'll tell you before you go in, as they told me, if this is a benign tumor in your bone, we'll take it out and we'll close you up, and you know, we'll talk next steps once we know what that is. If this is osteosarcoma, we're just going to take out a bit for biopsy and we're going to close you up, and then we're going to talk treatment, but we're going to leave the tumor in there. So the treatment is this is a standard thing. You get a biopsy and then you go into chemotherapy for 3 months, and they try to kill the tumor. They try to kill the cancer. Once you've had 3 months worth of trying to kill the tumor or take down the active cells within the tumor, then you go back into treatment for another 6 to 9 months, depending on how you're tolerating that chemotherapy. So also, I should add, they'll look at your necrosis or the cell death, the tumor death, once they've gone in, and they'll determine after that 3 months, after that full resection of the tumor, whether they're going to increase your chemotherapy, whether they're going to add a new component of chemotherapy or not. In my case, my necrosis was 45%. They added it in just to be sure. So that's pretty standard. That's the regimen that I went through, the timeline that I went through. And I had many of the same chemotherapies as a pediatric patient. But they tweaked it a bit just because I had a really aggressive tumor, and I could tolerate a bit more than a child could. So, you know, they work their magic, but same components.
Now, while you were there, you met a 10-year-old girl named Alyssa Divers, who was going through the same type of chemo, I guess, as you were. On her last day of treatment, and your last day of treatment, they found a lump in Alyssa, which signaled that her osteosarcoma was not in a good place. She was sent home with the knowledge that her odds of surviving were not good. How did you personally react to that?
So just to be clear, Alyssa and I were treated at different centers, but we had a community of osteosarcoma families that all knew each other across the country and indeed across the world. So I got to know Alyssa's story and her mom, and when I knew that Alyssa was likely not going to survive. In fact, her mom called on the day that it was determined that the clinical trial was not working. And she said, they're sending Alyssa home to die. And this struck me so hard. She had a younger sister. And, you know, for me, I couldn't get the image out of my head of Alyssa in a hospital bed in her living room with her family around her, and having her last memories, or the family's last memories of her more specifically, be of that space of waiting to die. And so I said to Alyssa's mom, Lynn, I said, no, like she has to live. And Alyssa's kind of fight mantra was live, Alyssa, live. It was her whole community's And I said, we've got to allow her to live her best life in whatever time she has left. And I felt strongly that this was a responsibility of our community to make sure that Alyssa had lived her dreams and her best life in the space of time that she had left. So I asked Lynn and her family, can you just give me 3 days in New York City and just leave the plans to me, and let's see what we can come up with.
And I'd like you to tell our audience what you did come up with, because it was an incredible 3 days for her.
So it was really a collaboration of friends and family. And so it wasn't just me. This was a community that came together to help out Alyssa and her family just make the best memories that they possibly could. So Alyssa was a dancer. She was now an amputee dancer, but being the extraordinary young woman that she was, she would still dance. Even on one leg, she had amazing balance. And so we decided to create a weekend for her based around dancing and performing. So the first night we got them tickets to the Rockettes, and they had front row seats and backstage one-on-one experience with the Rockettes. The next night was American Girl Doll on Fifth Avenue. And American Girl, they just treated them so beautifully. They gave Alyssa a doll that looked like her, and her sister got a doll that looked like her, like the sister. So Alyssa's didn't have any hair. And they had dinner at American Girl. And following that, they had tickets to Mary Poppins on Broadway, and again, had excellent seats and backstage. And then the third night was the Nutcracker at Lincoln Center. This was around Christmas time. And they had beautiful seats. And at the end of the Nutcracker, they let her come up on stage and dance across the stage. And she died 2 weeks later.
Well, it's an amazing story. And I know it was a collaboration, but the collaboration always has to be started by an engine, and you were the engine. So it's something that obviously will never be forgotten by you and her family, and just unbelievable, really. Now, you mentioned that Alyssa passed away two weeks after the trip. Do you think that you would have become as involved as you are in the osteosarcoma fight if you had not met Alyssa Divers and her family?
I think I would have been involved somehow, because, as I said earlier, you can't witness what you witness as a patient suffering the same way that your fellow patients are suffering, and not live to try and make it better. I really believe that. And I believe that so firmly, not because that was my story, but because I'm surrounded by people at MIB Agents whose story is exactly the same, that they want to help make it better. All of our experiences are different, but you come out of it desperate to help make it better because you've seen what you've seen. So many of our constituents at MIB Agents and our senior leadership team, our board of directors, our volunteers have been through this fight in one way or the other, whether they're physicians and researchers, whether they are bereaved parents or families whose child survived this disease. I don't think you can come out of this and just walk away.
Well, you've done a lot more than just walk away. That's for sure. You've thrown yourself into it full force, 100%, which is really incredible. Can you tell listeners what MIB stands for?
MIB stands for Make It Better. And the agents part is an important part of this because we all have to do something. We all have our magic that we can bring to the organization. And for some people, I remember before I was in the trenches with this disease with the kids, I thought, well, I can only donate so much money, and I'm not a doctor and I'm not a researcher. So what can I do? But there's so much somebody can do to help make it better for a child who is suffering from osteosarcoma. We all have magic and our own gifts that we can bring to improve the state of this disease and the well-being of kids in treatment and the state of research. Everybody can do something. So we wanted very much MIB agents to have a very large tent where everybody is welcome, and you just bring whatever you have to the table to help us make it better. So we're certainly a community in which everybody's welcome.
Well, that's certainly a good definition of agents in this case. No question about it. Now, when did MIB Agents become a full-fledged nonprofit, as opposed to perhaps you doing some self-funding and stuff like that?
Right. So for 4 years, we self-funded, and it was friends and family, and we were serving the kids that I was treated with that were still suffering, or they were feeling down and they needed uplifting, or they had reached hospice care. And we wanted to share an experience with them that we knew we could make happen. In 2016, when an unusual series of events happened that ended up with us committing to an annual conference for osteosarcoma specifically. So the conference today is the only medical research conference in the world where all constituents gather annually under one roof, under one general session, and we talk about current research, current innovation, current hope, and we all work together to fund that research, to move that initiative forward. Whatever the case is, everybody gets involved to try and make it better. But it wasn't until 2016 when we started planning this conference that we thought, okay, well, we better make this official. We've got a lot of work to do. And it's the type of work that can really only be undertaken as a nonprofit organization.
Now, fortunately, we were talking about this before the podcast started. There are many, many great foundations and organizations that concentrate on pediatric cancer. My question to you is, do you know of any other foundation or organization outside of MIB Agents that concentrates exclusively on osteosarcoma?
I do. There's the Osteosarcoma Institute, which was founded in honor and in memory of a young man named Willie. And we work together to try and make it better for kids with osteosarcoma, for kids like Willie, and for the kids that we serve. And we think this is a really important thing. We ask our researchers and our physicians to collaborate. And at our first conference, I ended the conference by saying, we're asking a lot of you. We're asking you to work together to make it better. And we, as nonprofit organizations and advocates and patient families, promise to do the same. So we can't do everything at MIB Agents. Other organizations can't do everything, but we each have our own magic that we bring to the table and that we're responsible for bringing to the table. So there are several osteosarcoma organizations that we are honored and delighted to collaborate with, and Osteosarcoma Institute is one.
Now, it's been 5 years since you became a full-fledged nonprofit. I'd like to know some of the steps in the last 5 years that you have taken to build such a well-known organization, and one that obviously is making such a difference.
The first step is being inclusive. We're dedicated to allowing people with whom we share the same intention to do what they would like to do what they're able to do to help make it better. And if they don't know what that thing is, we will be delighted to let them know where the need is and where they can be of help. The most important thing to us, and it's really best summed up by my favorite quote from a person named A.W. Tozier, who says, "It is not what a man does that determines whether his work is sacred or secular. It is why he does it." And that, to us, is the most important thing. Why are you doing this? Why do you want to be a part of this? What's important to you? And it's not just important for us to make a determination on who this person is or whether we want to engage with them, but it is important for the person to know, why are you doing this? Because this is not glory road. This is not, hey, look at us. This is really important, meaningful work. But it is only so if you undertake it as such. And if you undertake it with the attitude of everyone can do something and we can help each other, we just have to do it.
You've built up quite a list of partners, resources that have helped you, from Vermont Teddy Bear, which is as close to Canada as you can get, and the University of Miami, which is as close to the end of Florida as you could get. So you've really been all over the country, to try to interest and get these people to help you out. Has that been a difficult process, and how important has it become for you to be able to have these people on your side?
It hasn't been difficult. I think you find your people, right? Like you find your people, the people with whom you share a mission, an intention. That part is not difficult. And I don't think it's difficult either to come to an agreement with another organization or a company, institution. Those things are really not difficult as long as your intentions are aligned. That's the most important thing. Sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Well, I was also going to ask, that was pretty much the gist of the first question, but I was going to ask about in addition to that, your board members and your scientific advisory board. You have an awful lot of physicians, oncologists that are in line with you, as well as board members. How have they helped you get programs off the ground, give their ideas to you, and make this foundation so well known and so successful from a medical point of view?
So as you pointed out at the beginning of the podcast, with my background, I am not qualified to do this work. And I remember talking to my husband about this at the outset, going, what am I doing? Like this is not what I do. And what we landed on is God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And this is evident with the Titanic versus Noah's Ark. Right. So that gave us a little bit of audacity, I suppose, to undertake beginning an organization like this. What I knew is that I didn't know what I didn't know. I don't know how to treat this disease. I am not an expert on anything, including being a patient of this disease. Like this is a learn as you go from my side of the equation. So I know we needed help. How do we make it better? What do we do? What do you need? And when we started out as an organization, we were doing, and we still do, and it's one of the most important things we do, end of life experiences for kids. So one of our early missions was for a young man who was a violinist. And I thought, okay, here's what we're going to do. we're going to get Yo-Yo Ma, and we're going to create a really cool private concert or a one-on-one experience, or this. So this is what we're going to do. And I was getting all connected with how are we going to get this done. When I called, as we do, we speak with the child who is in hospice care, not just the family, but we directly speak with the child. When I spoke with this child, I said, how can we help you? What would you like to have or experience? And he said, I wish I could have seen Star Wars Force Awakens. And at the time it was in theaters, and he was too ill to go to a theater. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, talk about, this is a big lesson, because I thought I knew what he needed. It wasn't what he needed at all. He wanted to see Star Wars Force Awakens, not Yo-Yo Ma. I mean, and he said, by the way, that he had been very fortunate to have experienced having seen Yo-Yo Ma. So this was a lesson not only in how to undertake a mission for a child who's in hospice care, but how to undertake everything we did, to not assume that we knew that the doctor needed X, Y, or Z, or that the patient family needed X, Y, or Z, or that the patient themselves needed something specific. So we set about to ask, and we can only do that when we meaningfully and with great humility say, how can I serve you? How can I best serve you? What do you need? How can I help?
Well, what you've done, of course, is take the vast business experience that you had in the two organizations, that, or perhaps a few more that you've worked for, and you say, and try to hire and get involved with the best people that you need to help answer the questions of how do we treat osteosarcoma. So that's what you've done with, obviously, with your scientific and advisory board, and I'm sure some of the partners and resources that you've gotten to come onto your side. So the business experience is what you probably needed, not the scientific experience, but you did have the goal in mind, and you knew how to go to it. Now, I was watching a few of your videos with teenagers who shared their experiences with osteosarcoma. 2 of the 3 I saw did go through amputation. Do you have any type of figure on how many patients and families that you have worked with at least over the past 5 years since you've become a nonprofit?
Oh, how many families have we served?
Yeah. I'm just wondering if you had a figure for that and how many patients. I mean, it must be hundreds, maybe thousands. I don't know. But my guess is you've worked with a number of them.
We've worked with a number of them. We know a lot of them. And as much as we set out to serve families who are going through osteosarcoma, do you know one of the most astonishing things that happens when we approach a family who is suffering? I mean, they're in the trenches of this disease, and we'll say, how can we help you? And often they want to know, how can they help us? How can they help their fellow patients? What can they do? That's the extraordinary thing. And I think that's the definition of community. And, sort of like the ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So to that point, we have a junior board, and they are extraordinary young adults who, some are in treatment, some have survived, and some are siblings of those who have passed from osteosarcoma. And they are passionate about trying to make it better for the kids who are currently in treatment. And that desire shows up in many tactile ways. So one of the ways that young adults like to help others, and particularly our junior board, is in creating videos. And I'll tell you, when I was in treatment, I wished I would have been able to see somebody else who was in treatment or who had survived and what it feels like for them. It's really transformative for a person to see that and be served that, because it makes you feel less alone. You're less isolated in a very isolated space.
I think what I'm going to ask you now pretty much is on that scope. I saw a video with former Yankees manager Joe Girardi, who was talking about MIB agents. I mean, he mentioned the partnership that you have put together between current sarcoma patients and sarcoma patients who are hopefully have been cleared of their cancer. Is that your Angels Warriors program that Joe had been talking about? And if so, how has that worked out? Putting a patient with someone who was past treatment.
So that's our ambassador agent program. And our ambassador agents are those who are out of treatment for at least a year. And we have a certified peer visitor training program for those who are out of treatment for a year who wish to serve their fellow patients. And they go through this training. It's about 8 hours. We have a licensed clinical social worker who takes them through that training program. And once they've completed that program, they're a part of our ambassador agent program. When somebody who is in treatment, who is feeling fearful, isolated, unsure, does anybody survive this, needs support, they can go on our website and say, I need support. Please send me somebody who survived this disease. And we try to pair similar interests, similar age group, and similar surgeries. So as you noted, many osteosarcoma patients are amputees, some are limb salvage surgery, some are going through a new treatment called bone regeneration. And they walk in to see the patient and the caregiver, from a patient and a caregiver, with a tote bag filled with things that were informed by our junior board and by patient families. And they walk in, they give a 30-second introduction. This is who I am. This is my connection to osteosarcoma. How can we help you? And they hand over the tote bag, and they become a vessel into which those they are serving can empty their heart, and empty their heart to somebody who understands and can hear what they're saying and not be scared, not be put off by it, but can truly come from a place of understanding. Our feedback on the program has been simply, it almost didn't matter what they said or what they gave me. When they walked into my room, that's all that needed to happen. That somebody walked in and said, I've been where you've been, and I live to tell the tale, and I'm here to help you, was so hopeful and so powerful. Many of them have become ambassador agents themselves now.
It sounds like an absolutely great program, and that's something that putting these two like-minded people, because they had the same thing, but they're in a different position, and the patient can certainly be helped by the graduated patient, and the graduated patient, I'm sure, can still learn something from the patient who's going through it. So I'm sure it's obviously a win-win for everything. Now, I did mention the Angels Warrior program. Is that fairly similar, or is it on a different scope?
So I think you're talking about the list, the Angel Warrior list.
Yes.
So this, like many of our programs, it happened as a result of people who were in treatment who wished they would have had blank. So in the case of the Angel list and the Warrior list, when I was in treatment, there was a group, as I said earlier, of osteosarcoma patient families, and we were going through a really rough time as a group, where there were a lot of kids passing, or a lot of kids who were in hospice care or who were metastatic. And so people would come on this group. It was a listserv. You come on the group and they'd go, please pray for my child. This is what's going on. And it was getting really heavy and difficult. And I would write down on a notepad, this is who I need to remember to pray for. So I wrote back to the list, and I said, hey, here's my list of the people that I'm praying for that are really going through something difficult right now. Is this right? Have I missed anybody? And people went, oh, please pray for my child who just passed. Please pray for my child. So I started a list, and it just happened really organically, where then somebody would say, oh, can you move my child from the warrior list to the angel list? And that's how it became the far too long list that both of those lists are. So what happens now with the list is same thing that happened in the beginning. Please add my child to the warrior list, or my person to the warrior list. Please move them over to the angel list. What we now have going on with that list is, we call it prayer agents. So regardless of your spiritual practice, anybody can be a prayer agent, and the prayer agents are available for urgent or ongoing prayers. In addition to once a month, prayer agents gather virtually at 3 p.m. first Sunday of the month, and they light a candle, take a walk in the woods, go to their church, temple, mosque, whatever it is, with the list, and they read through those names. And this is a really important day of the month for our families, because they know that their child will be lifted in prayer or remembrance. They'll be celebrated, remembered, whatever the case is, whether they're an angel or a warrior. And then the final thing I'll say about that's really touching is that many of our osteosarcoma families and prayer agents, when they go on vacation and they're visiting a sacred site far away, they'll bring that list with them and read those names in that sacred place and light a candle.
I also read that you have some sort of a warrior mail program. Is this when patients can write letters to, graduated patient, that type of thing, and the graduated patient can write back and give encouragement? Is that what this program is set up for?
So this was also started from when I was in treatment. I had just had surgery, and I got a letter from somebody that I did not know, who knew that I was in treatment, and said, oh, I also have 3 kids now. What they don't really tell you is that the cancer is out of your body now. It was this very hopeful, uplifting letter, and it meant so much to me to have this letter. I still have this letter, and I'm now friends with. We've met in person. So it started from there. It was just really wonderful to hear from somebody who had gone through it. That program has expanded quite a bit now, where if somebody has a child who is in treatment and just needs some hope and cheer, they can sign up, and we ask them to share with us a photo, where they're at in treatment, et cetera. And then we have agent writers who are across the country and across the world. Even we have several international writers. And once a month, we send them a packet, and it has the warrior, the osteo warrior, the osteosarcoma patient who's in treatment, their photo, their age, their first name, their interests, and that's it. It goes out in this packet, and there's typically around 15 to 20 of these pictures and summaries. And the mail comes back to MIB agents. No addresses or last names are shared, comes back to us. And then we send out packets full of mail originally. Now we're sending out small boxes, sometimes large boxes, because somebody will say, oh, one of my one of my warriors really likes fishing, so they'll send a fishing jacket and a couple of lures. And so now it's not just mail, it's some small gifts, sometimes larger gifts that go out to the kid who is in treatment and just really wants to be uplifted and cheered on and be seen.
Another program that's obviously been very, very worthwhile for you. I want to go back just briefly to when you started the nonprofit, and you, of course, did it. You felt obligated to do it after you had your annual conference, which I believe is called Factor Osteosarcoma Conference. And I want to ask you about the program that you give a $100,000 grant each year to either a researcher or a scientist to come up with some sort of a solution to some issue in osteosarcoma. Can you talk about how that's worked out?
We love our it's called Outsmarting Osteosarcoma, and it is our annual grant process by which we find the most promising research that's being done in osteosarcoma that needs funding, and we fund it. How we fund it is unique in the world of funding medical research. We first go out to our physicians and researchers and anybody who's working in osteosarcoma discovery, and we ask them to give us a one-page, what are you working on? What do you need? And what are the goals? A typical RFP for research. And anybody who in the community has raised or donated $5,000 or more gets a seat at the table with their scientific advisory team to go through each of those proposals and vote on the top three. Once we have our top three finalists, we ask those top three finalists to present their work that they need funding for at our Factor conference. And by the end of the Factor conference, everybody who attends the Factor conference gets a vote. Which one do they think should get the $100,000 grant? We then fund that person who's earned the most votes. And post Factor, we go with a team of osteo warriors, kids who are in treatment, and their families. We visit the lab and we ask them to show us, what is this? What are you working on? What does this look like? Post that, they have to, it's part of the award. You have to present at our annual Factor conference. How's it going? What are you discovering? Where are you at? Win or lose, you have to present. And we are really grateful to the researchers that we have funded up until this point, because each one of them, even though they are no longer under any obligation to present at our Factor conference, they all come and they all say, this is as a result of this funding, this is where we're at today. And it's really fulfilling. And we're really grateful for the people who trust us with these funds to do right by them and to find the best research and find the best way to honor their child or their person who suffered with osteosarcoma through increasing research.
Where do you see MIB agents, say, 5 years from now? After I asked Ann about her plans for the next 5 years for MIB agents, Wi-Fi issues took over. And with my total lack of technological ability, as much as I tried, I was unfortunately unable to solve the problem that had occurred. I think that Ann would have answered that question by saying that she and her nonprofit will be continuing to do all that it could to raise awareness and money to improve the chances for these kids who had been diagnosed with the osteosarcoma and need so much help. If you would like to get in touch with MIB agents, please type in mibagents.org. There is plenty of very good information on that website if you'd like to get involved in the nonprofit or you would like to donate to it. Thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope that you enjoyed hearing Ann's story about Alyssa divers, which is just one example of how far Ann will go to help others in need. It is safe to say that she will be helping many osteosarcoma patients as time goes on. This is Mark Levine. Please tune in this coming Thursday when my guest will be Christina Kitchen, who lost her daughter Brianna to leukemia at the age of 9 and has been working tirelessly ever since on her Brianna's Love nonprofit, which Christina started to honor the memory of her beloved daughter.